Before that, get into our next top 10 list. It is left fielders this week. Last week we did shortstops. The preceding weeks before that, we've done catcher, center field, and first base. But yeah, we're back. We're back in the outfield once
Week
again.
5.
And yeah, before we get into it, outfields can always be specific outfield positions can always be tough to judge because oftentimes, we think a guy's gonna play at a certain position and then they don't. Like last year, we had Riley Green on the right field list because he was a projected right fielder and he mostly played right field, and then he went out and played mostly left field this past year. So now he's a left fielder, and maybe the Tigers will change their minds again and put him in right field or something like that. But yeah, so we're just going based off of largely the Fangraphs projected roster or kind of where they've historically played. And the two big people that would probably get included in most lists, but won't be from us because they're probably going to be DHs, are Yordan Alvarez, who has historically mostly been a DH and usually only fills in at left field, and then Christian Yelich, who has mostly played left field in his career. However, he's coming off an injury. Fangraphs has him as a projected DH, and also, the rest of the Brewers outfield is very viable defensively and would just be better options than Christian Yelich, whether that be Sal Frelick, Garrett Mitchell, Jackson Chorio, Blake Perkins, and even I think someone else that I might be missing. But uh, but but yeah, so yeah, don't worry. We do think that Yordan Alvarez and Christian Yelich would be on these lists if they were going to be left fielders, but unfortunately, they're going to be DHs, so they're not going to be making this list. And yeah, this is a projection for 2025. This is what we think they will do in 2025. So, maybe some players are going to be below some guys who had better years or had worse years last year. But this is just what we're going off of, thinking what they're going to do for 2025. Using the past for reference, but also using age and underlying numbers and whatnot. But yeah, without further ado, if you didn't have anything else to add, who's
Yeah,
your
real quick.
and
So
yeah, go
I
ahead.
have this is definitely the newest list that I've ever put together, or for this year at least. I have three returners to the left field list and one guy that played, yeah, like you mentioned, played right field last year and is now on the left field list. Um, at number 10 is one of my returners, a guy that kind of broke out last year. Definitely still left a little bit to be desired, but very overall put together a very solid performance. I don't think one that was on too many people's radars. I'm talking about Heliot Ramos from the San Francisco Giants, who hit the ball very hard last year, an average exit velocity of 91.5 miles per hour, a barrel rate of 14.5%. So, I mean, in terms of hitting the ball the right way, did a very good job of that. The defense was a bit subpar. The K and Walker numbers were not exactly where you want him to be. But regardless, he put together a 269, 322, 469 season for a 791 OPS in 518 plate appearances, just qualifying for the batting title. I really like Ramos a lot. I think a lot of what he did can be sustainable this next year because of his hard contact. He's a guy that swings the bat very highly. In fact, he has 90th percentile bat speed, swing, speed, which I really like. There's a lot I think that I kind of just enjoy in watching him. And he is my number 8. One little note I had about him is that he showed some improvements throughout the season, even if the numbers didn't exactly follow it. His pull rate went up by at least 4% in each month of the year. It started at like 20-ish% in May and then finished off around 40% in September. Additionally, from May through June, he pulled 8.1% of his fly balls. And from July to the end of the season, he pulled 23.2% of his fly balls. So a 15% increase in that department. Like I mentioned, he hits the ball very hard. If he can pull it, I think that gives him a better distribution of that power. That probably helps him. I think that could help him shoot beyond the 22 home runs that he hit last year if he's able to do that over the course of a full season. So for that reason, I have Heliot Ramos cracking the number 10 spot on this list.
Yeah, he definitely showed some signs and provided some power to a lineup that needed it for sure. My number 10 is one of my returners, and yeah, before I get into the list, I have the same thing. I have three returners, and three returners to go along with one guy who was on a different list. And yeah, so my number 10 is actually a returner, one of those three returners. He was number 7 on my list last year. It is Lars Nootbaar of
Ooh.
the St. Louis Cardinals. He is heading into his age 27 season. Um, and he has a 113 OPS plus and +1 defensive run value over the last 2 years. So, pretty good on both ends of the ball. What stands out about him is his plate discipline. He put up 100th percentile chase rate, 98th percentile walk rate in 2024, and that helped lead him to an 89th percentile expected WOBA in 2024. And yeah, with Lars Nootbaar, it's kind of interesting to talk about him because after 2022, I think a lot of people were high on him. He was heading into his age 25 season after that, coming off a year where with a 124 OPS plus and really good underlying numbers, but hasn't had quite the follow-up that a lot of, like sabermetrician nerds like us would have expected. However, he's still been very productive. Last thing I'll say is or the last two things I'll say is he has over the last 2 years kind of trailed his actual numbers have trailed his expected numbers. Part of that is kind of on him. He has only pulled 20% of his fly balls over the last 2 years, and that might explain some of those discrepancies. And then the last thing that kind of drags him down the list a little bit is he is yet to play 120 games in a season, despite him, I think, joining the league in 2021. So health has historically been an issue, unfortunately for him. But yeah, I mean, seeing, I'd be excited to see what he can do in a full season. He's been overall productive, but I think a lot of people would have thought they would have had him higher at this point, maybe 2 years ago. Who do you have at number 9?
Number 5, I have another one of my returners from last year's list. He was number 4 for me on the left field list last year, so he is moving down quite a lot, which I think is more due to the new incoming talent than his actual performance. It's Brian Reynolds from the Pittsburgh Pirates. There is still a lot that I really like here. I know that the defense is what it is. Both Fangraphs and Baseball Savant have him as basically the worst defender in the game, or at least one of the worst. What I like about Brian Reynolds, one, is that he's very consistent. He's one of just 11 players in Major League Baseball to have accumulated at least 610 plate appearances in each of the last 4 seasons. So he's one of the most available guys pretty much in the league. He doesn't really miss a lot of time for a team that doesn't have a lot of consistency. It has quite a bit of turnover, especially in the lineup. So I think he's meant a lot to that team over the last few years and will continue to do so this year. And I still like a lot of the batted ball metrics. He put up a 350 expected WOBA last year, which put him in the 85th percentile. He hit very well on a lot of different pitches. One stat that I had, and this is probably my favorite stat that I'll have on anyone throughout the episode, Brian Reynolds had a 1.9 run value per 100 against four-seam fastballs, which means for every 100 four-seamers he produced an approximate 1.9 runs for the Pirates. That was on 196 plate appearances. He had a 2.5 RV 100 on changeups in 101 plate appearances and a 1.1 run value per 100 against sinkers in 106 plate appearances. This made him one of just 4 players in Major League Baseball to have a run value of 100 above 1 on at least 3 different pitches with at least 100 plate appearances in the league. The other 3 to do that, Aaron Judge, Bobby Wood Jr., Shohei Ohtani. It's those 3 and Brian Reynolds that did that last year. So that is pretty much, if you could handpick 3 hitters to be in that sort of company with, it's literally those 3. That's where Brian Reynolds finds himself. He still hits the ball very hard. He hits it very well. The sweet spot rate is high. The batted ball distribution is pretty much exactly what I'd want it to be for him. He's still very quick. He has a 67th percentile sprint speed. The defense, I get it. It is what it is. There's still too much to like on offense for me to just keep him off the list entirely. For that reason, he is going in my 9th spot this year.
Yeah. My number nine is a newcomer to the list. He had shown flashes of greatness before this, but broke out once again. It is Tyler O'Neill, who just had his lone season with the Red Sox. He's going to be playing for the Orioles this upcoming year. He is heading into his age 30 season, and in 2024, he posted 3-year highs in average on base percentage, slugging, OPS plus, barrel rate, average exit velocity, and games played. So pretty much all the important offensive numbers as well as games played. Um, and among current starting left fielders with 400 plus plate appearances last year, he had the highest OPS among them. And had the underlying numbers to go with that. He also had a 98th percentile barrel rate, 87th percentile walk rate, 90th percentile expected slugging, and 76th percentile expected WOBA. And he pulled his fly balls quite a bit last year. I didn't put it down, but I know he had a very high rate of fly balls being pulled. Um, what kind of drags him down the list a little bit is just haven't seen the consistency in both performance and health. He this was they were 3 years highs for a reason, and that's because in 2022 and 2023 he struggled a little bit and also wasn't on the field that much. So and to kind of talk about his health, he's been in the league since 2018, but has only played 120 plus games once in his career. So yeah, I was really happy with what he did last year in the 113 games he played. But in order to move up this list and get above some of these guys in the rankings, I kind of need to see him both stay on the field and also repeat success to where, he's not necessarily having a fluky season. It's something we can sort of rely on. But yeah, Tyler O'Neill joining the left field list at number nine. Who is your number eight?
My number eight is another one of my returners. He was number two on last year's list. So going from two to eight, it is a bit of a drop. And there was a bit of a drop in performance as well. So it is somewhat warranted by what happened on the field. I'm talking about Brandon Nimmo, who is staying on my list, but yeah, there was a 103-point drop in OPS from last year to this year, 829 to 726. Oddly enough, there wasn't much of a reason for it though. A lot of the underlying numbers stayed pretty much the same. The average exit velocity was the same. All the batted ball distribution was relatively the same in terms of ground balls, fly balls, line drives, and pop ups. The direction was not too changed as well. The strikeout rates were the same. The walk rates were the same. So what happened? Well, if you dig a little more deeper into it, this is much of what I was able to find on Nimmo's offensive decline last year. In 2023, Nimmo hit 646 on line drives, and in 2024, he hit 592 on line drives. The average exit velocity on line drives for him, or excuse me, on line drives for him went from 97.3 miles per hour to 95.9 miles an hour. So there was a bit of a drop there. Additionally, he hit 314 on ground balls in 2023 and 225 on ground balls in 2024. His expected batting average was around 260 each year. So he got very lucky one year, very unlucky the next year. I think there's very good reason to believe both his line drives and flat and ground balls can get a little bit up to where they were before, as long as he sort of keeps everything else the same. So I'm banking on a bounce back season from Brandon Nimmo. I think he's much better than basically the league average hitter that he was last year. He only put up a 107 OPS plus. The defense is still fine. The base running is still very good. So he is remaining on this list, despite in all the incoming talent. He is my number eight left fielder this year.
Right, right. My number eight is another newcomer. He is not assigned to any team right now. It is Jurickson Profar, who just had an absolute career year this past year. He is heading into his age 32 season, and he's coming off career highs in average on base percentage, slugging, OPS plus, expected slugging, expected WOBA, average exit velocity, barrel rate, and fly ball rate. Guy's been in the league for a long time, and he had career highs in all of those in 2024. He's also coming off career lows in whiff rate and chase rate. Um, and among current starting left fielders who qualified last year, he had the highest OPS among them. and had the underlying numbers to go with it. His WOBA and expected WOBA difference was only 1 point. He had a 92nd percentile expected WOBA, and was the only player in baseball last year to have 80th percentile average exit velocity, 90th percentile chase rate, and 90th percentile whiff rate. Only player in baseball to be at those markers or better, to be at all three of those markers or better. And those are pretty important stats. It's, plate discipline, contact rate, and how hard you're hitting the ball. So, not necessarily looking after the most niche numbers. What kind of drags him down the list a little bit is he has a negative 20 defensive run value over the last 2 years. And then also, this season was very, very random. And we could look at this historically as like, oh, wow. Remember when Jurickson Profar had that 1 year? Yeah, that was crazy. So yeah, I kind of need him to repeat success to put him higher because he is 2 years removed from being below replacement, mostly with the Rockies. So yeah, the team he goes to could vary his ranking as well. But right now I have him at number 8, just because he certainly earned it this past year. But yeah, I just need to see him um, perform more and do this more in order to move him up the list. Who do you have at number 7?
At number 7, I have another newcomer to the list, a guy who is going into a contract year, and I think could be maybe a trade target for a team. There was talk about him getting traded this offseason, but it hasn't happened yet. Talking about Taylor Ward from the Los Angeles Angels. He is my number 7 left fielder coming into this year. 99th percentile sweet spot rate at 41.9%. Very good chase numbers. Also solid defense as well. He has a pretty dynamic skill set. He's not necessarily dominant in any one thing. He's more just very good at everything at large, I would say. One thing that really stood out to me is the batted balls, of course. 23.5% of batted balls hit by Taylor Ward in 2024 were hard hit and in the sweet spot. That means they were at least 95 miles per hour in exit velocity and had a launch angle between 8 to 32 degrees, which is kind of where you want it. I know it's a very wide spectrum, but generally where you get the best results anywhere in that zone. And he did both of those things 23.5% of the time. And that was the 5th highest rates among the 87 batters with at least 400 batted balls last year. So he did it in a very large sample size as well. He also had a 13% barrel rate this year, showing that he was hitting the ball very hard. In general, his fly ball rate went up by 4% last year. His line drive rate went up by 5%, and his ground ball rate went down by 9%. So, he I think readjusted his batted ball distribution to fit his play style a little bit more. He hit very well on four seam fastballs this year, which is always something that I really like. The strikeout numbers did go up a little bit, but I think it's kind of a worthy sacrifice with everything else that was done. And like I said, again, a 42% sweet spot rate, which is really solid. That'll play pretty much anywhere. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Taylor Ward could do in a contract year, maybe even on a different team. We'll have to see what happens there. But for now, he is my number 7 left fielder.
Yeah, right, right, right. Yeah, my number 7 left fielder is yeah, my youngest player on the list. He was not on my list he was not on my list in 2024. I'm talking about Nationals left fielder James Wood, who is heading into his age 22 season, coming off a rookie year where he played 79 games. He put up a 122 OPS plus in 336 plate appearances last year. And that was slightly underperforming his expected numbers. And then before that, he put up a 1058 OPS in 52 AAA games. So he was carrying over some success from AAA. Last year, he put up a 92.8 mile per hour average exit velocity, which is really, really impressive. From his debut on, he ranked 13th out of 128 hitters in average exit velocity. Um, However, kind of what moves him down a little bit is he struggled on the defensive end. He had -6 outs above average and -6 defensive runs saved. However, I mean, this could end up looking kind of as a bit of an underrating, and I see reason to move him up this list because he could really break out offensively with a few changes. You almost have to look at him this upcoming year like you looked at maybe Elliot De La Cruz, at least on the offensive end last year. Um, with some decreases in ground ball rate, increases in fly ball rate, and with Wood particularly some increases in pull rate, he could have a monster season at least on the offensive end. So seven could look a little tame, but I kind of have to see it in order to I kind of have to see it happen in order for me to see him in that higher regard. But yeah, I mean, I Jerks and Profar. The last thing I'll say with Jerks and Profar is Jerks and Profar certainly had better than the eighth best season last year. But with Wood, projecting for 2025, with Wood, I see him doing better than Profar in 2025, considering age, and the underlying things where Profar, he's a lot older and also had that random season, whereas Wood, highly regarded as a prospect, showed some really great flashes last year, and I think will be the seventh best left fielder in baseball in 2025. Who do you have at number six?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time we're actually talking about a player that was talked about by the other person. I am talking about James Wood in my number six, and you pretty much nailed everything that I wanted to say. So I'll keep it brief. One thing that you didn't touch on, but you definitely implied this: James Wood does not swing the bat really at all. He swung the bat just 38.2% of the time last year. From the time that he debuted through the regular season, that was the third lowest swing rate among the 128 batters with at least 1,000 pitches seen in that span. And I think swinging around that rate can be a very good thing. I mean, some of the best hitters don't swing a lot. You look at Juan Soto, even Aaron Judge to a degree, Shohei Ohtani, like they don't swing a ton of the time, definitely below average. And 38.2%, maybe that's a little egregious, but a 21% chase rate, in your essentially big league cup of coffee type year, I think that's really, really awesome and has the potential to make James Wood a fantastic player. Obviously, there's a lot to be worked on, right? You talked about the pull rate. You talked about the line drive or the fly ball rate, the ground ball rate. The defense certainly needs to be worked on. There's plenty of things where James Wood definitely left a lot to be desired last year, but he's only going into his age 22 season. There's still so much room for improvement, and he already showed so much promise last year in what he did do. Right, he hit the ball on average close to 93 miles an hour. He had a 52% hard hit rate. He still put up a 354 OBP despite all the things that need to be worked on. Like if that's his floor, I mean, where is his ceiling? It could be higher than six, but we don't really know how much of it is going to be fixed completely this year. So for that reason, I am putting him at number six. Like you said, that could end up being an underrating of him, but I think right now that's where I feel most comfortable putting him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, my number six, I'm keeping it young. And it kind of made sense for me at least to pair these two right next to each other, with James Wood at number seven and Wyatt Langford at number six. He was another guy who was a highly touted prospect, who made his MLB debut last year. Got some more playing time than James Wood last year because he started the year on the Rangers. But on the Rangers at the MLB level. Wyatt Langford, he was not on my list last year, but makes the list this year at number six. He is heading into his age 23 season, and he struggled to start the year. Definitely on the surface. And then in his final 98 games, he put up an 804 OPS and went 18 for 20 on stolen bases. And he also ranked second in F4 among current starting left fielders in that 98 game span. And then, throughout the whole year, he put up +5 defensive run value. So yeah, he really ended the year a lot better. And I think I'm kind of ranking him based off of that because, oftentimes with younger players, we see them kind of take a little bit to, get their footing in MLB. And it seemed like that was the case with Wyatt Langford. And, with younger guys, I tend to value the how they ended the season a lot more than how I view their season as a whole. So that's why I view Wyatt Langford as a number six left fielder. And yeah, I mean, just like with Wood, this could end up being a big underrating of him. But yeah, just kind of have to see him perform more at that level, and yeah, we could see he's certainly a breakout candidate for 2025. But yeah, he gets my number six nod. Who do you have at number five?
Yeah, at number five, I have my third and final returner from last year's left field list. He was at number eight last year. He jumps up to number five this year, which is weird because he kind of did exactly what we knew he was going to do. Chris and I love talking about this guy as basically the model of consistency in Major League Baseball. I'm talking about Ian Happ from the Chicago Cubs, who put up, yeah, I mean, 5 points worse in batting average, 11 points worse in OBP, 10 points higher in slugging percentage. So I mean, or no, excuse me, 19 points lower in OBP. Yeah, I mean, we pretty much knew what season Ian Happ was going to put up, and he did exactly that. And yet he's jumping up 3 spots on this list. I think that sort of notoriety and that sort of consistency means more the longer it goes on. He's only going into age 30 next year. It's not like he's, completely old. I know that 30 is sort of that landmark age, but, just hitting it is all right. He is still doing just the whole thing. He walked 12% of the time last year. He hit the ball very hard. He had an average exit velocity over 90 miles per hour, his highest average exit velocity in a season since 2020, which was excellent. He lowered his ground ball rate by 2%, but more importantly, upped his fly ball rate by 5% and upped his pull rate very, very slightly as well. Interesting thing about Ian Happ, he had a 22 run value on fastballs last year, not run value per 100, but run value, the count stat accumulated. His 22 run value on all fastballs was 10th highest among all hitters in the league. He also had a 20 run value on sinkers and cutters, which was third in baseball behind just Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. It went Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Ian Happ on that rankings list. Yeah, Ian Happ has pretty much done the exact same thing in each of the last like 3 to 4 seasons, I would say. He's the kind of guy that you really just know what you're getting out of him. And he's in my 5 spot this year. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen him play, you know exactly who he is. He's a 3 to 4 win player. He'll stay on the field for a lot of the season, get you well over 600 plate appearances, be like around 800 OPS guy with solid base running and manageable defense at Wrigley. And he's my number five left fielder.
Yeah, I will join you on that. Ian Happ is my
Yeah,
number
that's
five.
all the things we've disagreed on this list. We have to agree on Ian Happ. Like that's the one
Yes.
essential here.
Yes, Ian Happ is not only my number five left fielder in baseball, he is the number five left fielder in baseball. Definitely according to us. Yeah, he is the most consistent man in baseball. And I have no problem labeling him that. And because, consistent doesn't always necessarily have to mean, you know, showing out all the time. It just means you have to have the same level of performance over a period of time. And that is exactly what Ian Happ has done. And he's been productive for sure. Absolutely. That's why he gets the number five spot. In 2022, 2023, and 2024, his weighted runs created plus was 122, 120, and 122. And then his FWAR was 3.7, 3.4, and 3.6. It doesn't really get any more consistent from that. Uh, it doesn't really get that, it doesn't really get more consistent than that from a baseball player. His expected WOBA was within 5 points from 2023 to 2024. And he had the underlying numbers to back his performance last year. He was 70th percentile or higher in chase rate, walk rate, sweet spot rate, hard hit rate, barrel rate, average exit velocity, expected slugging, and expected WOBA. So has the underlying numbers to back his production. And since he's 30, there's really no reason to believe that he will either get better or fall off. And yeah, the reason why he, as you mentioned, the reason why he rises up the list is some positional changes and also some underperformance from other players. I know Corbin Carroll was on our list, on our left field list last year. He's a right fielder this upcoming year, and didn't end up really playing much left field last year. So that adds a factor, and yeah, there were some guys that we thought were going to have some breakout years last year that didn't end up doing that. But Ian Happ, in his usual self, just maintained that, around 3.5 F4, around 20% uh, above average at the plate, and kept doing his thing, and that rises him up the list. So yeah, Ian Happ, number five. And yeah, I forgot to mention, we had him the same last year too. He
Did
was my
we?
number eight. He was
Let's
my
go.
number eight
Yeah.
last year. So,
Listen,
um,
I
so we
think it's
moved.
funny because we agreed so heavily last week with shortstop. I think we were due for just a chaos week at left field. But Ian
Yeah,
Happ just is the eye of the storm, right? Like
yeah.
he is the one cool, calm, collected. We agree on it in the center.
He's the immovable object
Yeah.
in how we view him. So yeah, shout out to Ian Happ, just the most consistent man in baseball. But yeah, now we get back to the chaos. Who is your number four?
Yeah. Number four, this is where I start getting into what I kind of viewed as my elite tier of left fielder. Pretty much anyone from one through four could be interchangeable. This guy that I'm about to talk about, I could probably be convinced that he would be number one on this list. Maybe Chris has him because he hasn't mentioned him yet. I'm talking about Stephen Kwan from the Cleveland Guardians, who put up an excellent season last year, probably the best that he's put up in his young career, albeit he missed some time with an injury. He slashed 292, 368, 425 for a 793 OPS, along with fantastic fielding and fantastic base running, putting him above what, like, was it 6 F4 last season?
Four,
Right?
definitely four.
It was four, yeah.
Well, he missed some time.
4.1.
He might have
4.1.
gotten
Yeah,
six if
4.1
he
with a
didn't
missed
get
time.
injured.
And that was with a slump too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I really like what Ian Happ or what Ian Happ. Well, I do really like what Ian Happ did last year, but I also really like what Stephen Kwan did last year. I don't know how sustainable it was to keep that sort of ceiling. I almost feel like last year maybe was kind of Stephen Kwan's ceiling, right? He had a period where he was unbelievable and one of the best in the league, right? He was a starting all-star, the leadoff hitter for the American League, and then he went through a bit of a slump to end the year. But all of the essential Stephen Kwan traits remained, right? The strikeout rate was below 10%. The walk rate surpassed the strikeout rate. The whiff rate was 100th percentile. He didn't chase at anything. The sweet spot rate was very good. The expected batting averages. He played elite defense in left field, giving him yet another Gold Glove. He ran the bases very well. All of the, like I said, the essential Stephen Kwan traits were there. I don't know how I feel about the drop in ground ball rate by nearly 10%. Because I feel like I don't know if Stephen Kwan is the kind of guy that you want hitting fly balls at a 28.3% rate, but hey, he did hit 14 home runs last year, which is more than I think most people would have projected out of him. An interesting thing, and this is obviously a little bit misleading, but from March through June of 2024, Stephen Kwan had a line drive rate of 31.1% and a 178 weighted runs created plus in that same span. And then in July through September, his line drive rate dropped to 24.8% and his weighted runs created plus went down to 90. Now, of course, I'm not going to say that a 7% drop in line drive rate made Stephen Kwan an 88% worse hitter. There's obviously other factors in that too, but there is some merit to saying that when he hits as many line drives as possible, this is where you get the best version of Stephen Kwan. We saw that for a period of time last year. He ended up right at 27.8% last year, which is right around his career average. I think there's still a lot of very good things with Stephen Kwan. Obviously, I'm putting him at number four for a reason. There's still, I think, is a case for him to be number one. But the lack of power, I do think limits him to a certain degree. When comparing him to some other players that also have a lot of the same skill sets. For that reason, he's going in my number four.
Yeah. He's certainly had a great year last year, and yeah, it was for a time the 2024 version of Luis Ariz, but actually
Mhm.
was hitting some homers.
Yeah.
So yeah, shout out to Stephen Kwan. My number four is Brandon Nimmo. A little bit of a discrepancy from us there. But he was my number two last year. He was your number two last year as well. And yeah, there is certainly reason, more than the on the surface numbers, to drop him down the list, because his expected numbers did go down. But yeah, what I'll say about Brandon Nimmo, he's heading into his age 32 season. So getting on the older side, but not necessarily tail end of career type age. He is coming off career lows in on-base percentage, slugging, OPS, and OPS plus, and that is career lows in seasons in which he played at least 35 games because he was below that in I think is what might have ended up being his rookie year or his first season in baseball where he didn't play that many games. So career lows in seasons in which he had 35 plus games played. However, despite those career lows, he did not completely fall off under the surface, as you kind of talked about. Or at least prefaced, he actually had his highest average exit velocity and his second highest barrel rate of his career, and also posted a 3-year high in walk rate. A lot of his kind of drop off in offense production had to do with a little bit of lack of luck. His BABIP was 57 points below his career average last year, and if his BABIP was at his career average last year, he would have had 21 more hits. And out of 122 hitters with 2,000 plus pitches seen last year, Brandon Nimmo had the sixth unluckiest difference in batting average and expected batting average. So yeah, I expect some recorrection next year. He still drops down the list just because other players rose up the list, and I definitely view him a little bit worse than I did at this point last year because now he's a year further removed from that I think career year that he had in 2022. But yeah, I still view him as a potential pretty productive left fielder, just not necessarily in that elite tier anymore. And breakout year again, he could rejoin that. But yeah, Brandon Nimmo is my number 4. Who do you have at number 3?
At number three, I have the guy that you and I prefaced earlier as a guy that was a right fielder for us last year, moved over to left field, and is now kind of in my, like I said, my elite tier of left fielders. Talking about Riley Green from the Detroit Tigers in my number three spot here. Just a really excellent season last year. I think it was one of my favorite breakouts to watch last year. If we're calling, what he did a breakout, I know that it wasn't on the surface too much more than what he had done in his previous year, but regardless, hit the ball very hard, hit in the sweet spot, near 40% sweet spot rate and a hard hit rate of 47%. So a combination of those two things are excellent. Not to mention, he also had an 11% walk rate. He had a 23% chase rate, which is below the league average, and a 13% barrel rate. There's a lot of things that he did, I think, very well on offense. His fly ball rate went up by 6% from 21.8% to 27.7%, which I really like. I think Riley Green's a guy with a lot of power. And with that comes ideally as many fly balls as possible. He obviously does play in a pitcher friendly ballpark. So line drives are certainly very helpful too. But he has enough power to where, he still hit 24 home runs last year, regardless. So I'm very excited to see, what he can do next year. I think there's a lot of potential for him to step up and be sort of the face of that Detroit Tigers lineup, especially if they aren't able to acquire anyone in the offseason, right? They're going to expect him to be kind of that middle of the order bat. And he did take the appropriate step up last year to show that, there's a reason to have that hope. Uh, One thing that stood out to me about Riley Green is the improvement with four seam fastballs, which again is something that I really like. His average exit velocity on four seamers went from 89.9% in 2023 to 93.1% by miles per hour in 2024, a 4 mile per hour increase. His barrel rate went from 9.4% on four seamers to 18%. And that 18% was the highest, the 11th highest among the 128 hitters with at least 100 batted balls against four seamers. So he became kind of an elite hitter on four seamers specifically last year. And that gives me a lot of hope because obviously that's the pitch that you're probably going to see the most of. If you could do damage about that, it lowers your floor by a lot. And then, with that comes, hitting against off speeds and breaking balls as a bonus, which he also did a very good job of as well last year. So Riley Green is going in my 3 spot. And I'm very excited to see him next year.
Yeah, certainly. Definitely one of the mainstays of that organization, and arguably the best hitter in that lineup, if I'm not missing anybody.
Gary
My
Carpenter is like the only competition I would say.
Yeah, exactly. When you're in a facing right-handed pitchers competition and your opponent is Kerry Carpenter.
Yeah,
Um,
it's over.
it's over. It's donezo.
Carry Bonds.
Carry Bonds. My number three left fielder is Stephen Kwan. You had him at number four. I had him at number five last year, and he moves up the list to
Yeah,
number
and you were
three.
right. I was
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah. We had some discrepancies in our positional and top 50 lists, and you definitely won some of those discrepancies, and but Stephen Kwan was one where I got the better of it. He is a but yeah, he moves up the list even further this year. He is heading into his age 27 season, and yeah, we talk about that offensive improvement, but let's not forget he is the best defender at the position of left field. He has plus 19 defensive run value and plus 47 defensive runs saved since entering the league in 2022, and he has won the Gold Glove every year of his career. But yeah, what moves him up the list is that offense because that improved. His OPS plus improved from 97 to 126 from 2023 to 2024. And a lot of that had to do with kind of, where he was putting the ball, both both kind of angle wise and in terms of part of the field. He went from a 20% fly ball rate to a 28% fly ball rate, and he went from having a 2.3% pulled fly ball rate to a 7.9% pulled fly ball rate, and that's of all batted balls. And he also went from pulling 11% of his fly balls to pulling 28% of his fly balls. And that, you know, in part to that, that increased his home run total from 5 to 14, despite playing 36 less games. His home run total nearly tripled despite playing 36 less games. So yeah, Stephen Kwan greatly improved his offense last year. I don't necessarily expect him to be as good a hitter this year. His OPS plus, his career OPS plus is I think 114. I kind of expect him to be around there, maybe not necessarily in the 126 area that he was this past year. But yeah, I expect him to be, above average hitter and just a very good all-around player. Obviously he's won the Gold Glove each of the last 3 years, and has been a very productive base runner as well. Just kind of, all-around player, doesn't need the power to be an above average hitter, and yeah, is my number three left fielder in baseball. Who do you have at number two?
Yeah, number two, this is where I put maybe an ambitious pick at number two, a guy that I suspect you're gonna put at number one. But it kind of clears the way for maybe the big takeaway of this list. Talking about Jaron Duran in my number two spot from the Boston Red Sox, and I see Chris smiling. He knows exactly what I'm implying there. Jaron Duran was one of the best all-around players in baseball last year. He played 160 games, had 735 plate appearances, and with that, slash 285, 342, 492 for an 834 OPS. He hit 21 home runs, stole 34 bases, played elite defense, was one of the best base runners in the game, and just overall had an awesome season for the Red Sox. Who had what 8.7 wins above replacement, I believe, on one of the websites. Just
Baseball Reference,
on
yeah.
Baseball Reference, yeah, and then a little less on Fangraphs, but hey, that's all right. Regardless, he was phenomenal. Jaron Duran joined Bobby Witt Jr. as the only two players last year to have 20 batting runs, 5 base running runs, and 10 fielding runs on Baseball Savant in 2024, just to kind of show how dynamic he was last year. He sprayed the ball around the field very well, kind of hit to all fields. Both in power, both in contact as well. A lot of doubles off the monster for him this past year. Very aggressive base runner, and it worked for him most of the time, which was very cool to watch. His barrel rate also went up by 4% this past year, which for a contact primary hitter like him, I think that's a huge difference. And that's, that really helps him stand out the way that he did last year. Um, and the line drives were still very good. They were above average, 25.6%. That's a guy you want hitting as many line drives as possible. Yeah, and like I said, elite defender, elite base runner. He was just phenomenal all around, and he is my number two, not because of his performance, but because of the guy that I will be talking about in a few minutes.
Yeah, I feel like we're about to have a Max Fried moment. If you're a fan of the show, if you're a fan of the show and the positional lists, you'll know what I'm talking about because yeah, I think yeah, last year when we were doing our pitcher lists, like our our mine, it was consistent that like your number three was my number four, and your number two is my number three, and it was like, who's the guy? Who could possibly be number one? Um, and uh, and yeah, I had Max Fried at number one, so I think if I'm thinking of the right guy, you're gonna have that guy at number one. But yeah, my number before we get into what my number two is, we have to talk about or what my number what my number one is. We have to talk about my number two, who is Riley Green. You're number three on this list. And he was my number seven right fielder last year, as well as I believe your number seven right fielder as well. Riley Green kind of made the steps that we thought he would make, and that's rose him up the list, or at least in terms of a respective list. And yeah, still a young man. He's heading into his age 24 season and has a 127 OPS plus and 4.2 FWAR per 650 plate appearances over the last 2 years. Among the current starting left fielders with 800 plus plate appearances over the last 2 years, his OPS ranks second. And then along with that, he also has +4 outs above average in 90 games at the position in that span. If you are a big fan of defensive runs saved, I know our friend of the show, Mark Simon, is. Riley Green had a +14 defensive runs saved in 84 games at left field last year. So yeah, I don't know if he'll necessarily be at that level again this upcoming year, but it shows that the baseball consensus is that he's a defensively viable left fielder for sure, along with the very very productive offense. And then going back to that offense, he was 80th percentile or higher in bat speed, chase rate, walk rate, sweet spot rate, hard hit rate, average exit velocity, barrel rate, expected slugging, and expected WOBA. There was really not many weaknesses to his offensive game last year, and that led him to having a 133 OPS plus last year. So yeah, we were both high on Riley Green last year, and we're both high on him again this year because yeah, he made those steps. That made him a very good hitter this past year, and we could see even more growth as he heads into his age 24 season. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into your reveal of the number one left fielder in baseball.
Yeah, Chris, I told you before this episode that I had a take that I've been sitting on for a few weeks. I told you before this show that this was one of the nuttiest lists I've ever made. Who do you think I put at my number one spot?
Based on who I have in the list and who I view, unless like I totally blanked on somebody and somebody's playing left field that I didn't think was playing left field, my guess is Wyatt Langford.
And you'd be 100%
All
correct.
right.
I have
Okay,
Wyatt
good.
Langford as my number one left fielder in baseball last year. He put up a 740 OPS last year in his rookie season. This is a very ambitious pick, no doubt. But regardless, I'm all in on what I saw from Wyatt Langford last year. But aside from all the struggles, he still put up a very strong season. 7 runs, 7 batting runs, 3 base running runs, 5 fielding runs. There was really not a single aspect of baseball that he wasn't at least some degree of good at last year. 98th percentile sprint speed, 29.8 feet per second, strong fielding on both websites, Fangraph on. Also a 23% chase rate for a guy just entering the majors. Above average on every baseball savant slider, with the exception of sweet spot rate, which did go up as time went on last year, and then just a little bit below average on squared up percentage. But that's all right because the bat speed is there, and I fully believe that that will go up next year. Why do I love Wyatt Langford so much? Because he pretty much fulfills every single thing that I like in a baseball player. And he also ended the season very strong last year, as Chris mentioned. From September on last year, in the last month of the season, Wyatt Langford was tied for the most FWAR among all AL position players. That was that was huge for me. Like that made me believe like if he can finish it that way, I could see a Bobby Witt Jr. style breakout in 2025 from Wyatt Langford. For the last 2 months, he had the highest FWAR among all of my top 4 left fielders on this list. He had a higher FWAR than Jarren Duran in the last 2 months of the season, higher than Riley Green, higher than Stephen Kwan, and more importantly, the batted ball distribution was exactly what I want to see. From the in the second half of the season, Wyatt Langford pulled 48% of his fly balls, of his batted balls, the 13th highest among the 126 hitters with at least 150 batted balls in the second half. He had a 14.1% pulled fly ball rate, which was the seventh highest on that same list. And during the span, he pulled 45.5% of his fly balls, the sixth highest among the 56 hitters with at least 50 fly balls. So he hit a lot of fly balls, and when he hit them, he pulled them a lot, almost half of them. And this is from the entire second half of the season. The results didn't start coming in until September, but he was putting in the work and doing everything that he was supposed to the entire second half and wasn't getting rewarded for it for the end of July and the entire month of August. I fully believe that if he continues this, and I do believe he can, we should see an accurate representation of what we saw in September last year over the course of perhaps a full season. Maybe not exactly to the degree of a 996 OPS, but something very close to it with elite defense and elite base running. This is a list where you base things off of how you think they're going to do in 2025. Obviously, I wouldn't be putting Wyatt Langford number one if we were going off of 2024 performance, but I am all in on this massive breakout. I think he is the next big superstar that we are going to see in Major League Baseball, and I am ready to see that season from Wyatt Langford, and I'm putting him at the top of my left field list. It's very ambitious, but I believe in it.
Yeah. This is the moment of the positional rankings so far. We've done 5 lists. This is the biggest moment so far. You're putting it on the table
Yeah,
and you're saying Wyatt Langford, best left fielder. Uh, when you say a Bobby Witt Jr. style breakout, are you referencing his 2023 season or his 2024 season?
referencing his 2024 season.
Then now this Daniel
I'm not.
Curren
I'm
putting
not.
it
I'm
on the
not. Listen,
table.
I'm not putting him number one if I'm talking about a Bobby Witt Jr. 2023 season.
I mean, that's even if it was a 2023, the guy put up, I think, like 5.5 FWAR or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been worthy of a top spot, but a Bobby Witt Jr. style breakout. And let's remember, I I thought it might have been a little ambitious to put Bobby Witt Jr. ahead of Francisco Lindor on the shortstop list. I would have maybe thought that it would have been a little bit ambitious to put Bobby Witt Jr. on the top 10 uh, player in top 10 for MLB players list. But you did it last year, and you were correct. And you were correct where a lot of other people were incorrect. So you're putting it on the table with Wyatt Langford. So this could end up paying off as well, and it could end up looking good for you at the end of 2025. So I appreciate the ambition that you're putting out there for Above Replacement Radio. But yeah, to follow that up, I'm going with the basic pick. My number one is Jarren Duran. Your number two, your number two left fielder in baseball. Jarren Duran was not on any of my lists last year. Um, and yeah, by the way, we should clarify with Jarren Duran. He's a projected left fielder this year. Um, the Red Sox have kind of said that they want Ceddanne Rafaela out in center field as much as possible this upcoming year. So that's why we have him in the left fielder list, even though he played mostly center field last year. Trevor Story got hurt, which moved Rafael to shortstop. Whereas Rafael was they plan to mostly have him in center field last year, and that's the plan for this year. So that's why Jarren Duran is on our left field list. But yeah, so talking about Jarren Duran, he is heading into his age 28 season. He leads current starting left fielders in FWAR over the last 2 years, and he also led last year. Along with leading in FWAR, he also led current starting left fielders in BSR and stolen bases in 2024. And he was second in all of baseball, regardless of position, in extra base taken run value, which is a StatCast metric, measures what you do when the ball is in play and you didn't end up hitting it. Um, so uh, so yeah, and regarding his improvement last year, he had quality increases in average exit velocity and barrel rate, and a quality decrease in strikeout rate, which all led to a 129 OPS plus, and also a league lead in doubles and triples. He had 48 doubles and 14 triples last year. Part of that had to do with the fact that he, pretty much played every game except the games that he was suspended. But he accumulated a lot of pretty good numbers on the extra base hit front. Um, and uh, and also with Jaron Duran, he wasn't on any of our lists last year, but this was not a completely random offensive burst. He had a 121 OPS plus in 2023. It's just maybe injuries got in the way, and he had basically half the amount of plate appearances in 2023 as 2024. This was him in full form, and he really, really excelled. What I will say is what was random about his 2024 season was that he put up plus 12 defensive run value while playing mostly center field. I mean, that is really, really valuable defensively, but it was kind of random. We hadn't seen that level of defense from him previously in his career. So, yeah, we will see if he keeps that up. I don't necessarily expect the same year out of Jarren Duran in 2025. Where he puts up, 6.7 F4. But, he was so far above and beyond everyone else at the position last year and was so good all around that I can't deny him the number one spot this year. And because yeah, like even if he falls off a little bit, he can still have like a 5-win season or something like that, which is certainly the top echelon of left fielders. So I love Jarren Duran for this year. Yeah, before we get into the 10 through 1, yeah, bef I remember you messaged me before we did the episode this week. You were like, um, did you see a significant drop off from 4 to 5 in your lists, in your top left fielder list? And I was like, well, I see it more in 3 to 4. So I definitely see what that was. And when I thought about it more and I was doing the list more, I was like, he either has James Wood or Wyatt Langford ranked really high, and it ended up being Wyatt Langford. So yeah, pretty
When
cool.
I saw your text that said it was more 3 to 4 for me, and I was like, okay, well, there's one odd man out. It's probably Wyatt Langford, who I have in my one. I don't think it's gonna be Quan Green or Duran.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, without further ado, what is your 10 through 1?
Yeah, very, very different list from us this week.
Yeah.
Number 10, I have Heliot Ramos. Number 9, Brian Reynolds. Number 8, Brandon Nimmo. Number 7, Taylor Ward. And number 6, James Wood. Number 5, Ian Happ. Number 4, Stephen Kwan. Number 3, Riley Green. Number 2, Jaron Duran. And number 1, Wyatt Langford.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have 7 overlaps. I did not have Ramos, Ward, uh
Reynolds.
or Reynolds. I will say Taylor Ward was my number 11 on the list. Um,
Yeah. Jurickson Profar was my number 11. Trevor Larnach was my number 12.
yeah, yeah, he was an interesting guy for sure.
Mhm.
Um, my so yeah, my number 10 was, let me go back to the list here. Yeah, my number 10 was Lars Nootbaar. Number 9, Tyler O'Neill. Number 8, Jurickson Profar. Number 7, James Wood. Number 6, Wyatt Langford. Number 5, Ian Happ. Number 4, Brandon Nimmo. Number 5, Stephen Kwan. Number 2, Riley Green. And number 1, Jarren Duran. So yeah, that does it for the top 10 left fielders list. Next week we have the third baseman. But
Another
yeah,
stacked position.
that does not mark the end of the episode.